My name is Ryan Schwabe. I'm a mixing and mastering engineer, and here are some of the biggest mistakes I see mixing engineers make when they're working with mastering engineers. The first thing is overcooked mixes, and I can hear it right away when a record is just overprocessed. Every insert and every bus is mangled and smeared with an overuse of plugins. I can hear it right away. So my first tip is don't do too much. It's not that you shouldn't do a lot of things in a mix, it's just know when you're doing too much. Sometimes less is way more. There's nothing wrong with going hard in a mix, but when one process gets undone by the next, then you've gone too far. And all you're left with really is just the artifacts of all those processes, which is that digital, hashy nastiness that we don't like about modern recordings. So to sum it up, just make sure that every mix move is intentional, improving the source and not reacting to the last process that you inserted. The next problem I often see is just issues in the low end of the mix. Mixing low end and low mids is one of the biggest struggles for young engineers, especially for people that are in compromised rooms or if they're mixing in headphones. Resonances or holes in the low end is what creates uneven distribution of energy between the first 3 octaves in a mix. If you think about the first 3 octaves, we have 20 to 40, 40 to 80, and 80 to 160. Those are the first 3 audible octaves that we as humans can hear. And getting the balance of those 3 right is key to making a really linear and powerful low end for whatever production. And getting those 3 octaves correct in the mixing process is really important to getting a loud and balanced master. When working in compromised spaces, your best bet is referencing songs that you know and love. And don't spin yourself in circles tweaking on 10 different compromised playback systems. 1 or 2 compromised playback systems is probably enough. For more tips on dialing in the low end, check out my blog post called Struggling with Low End in Your Mix. Try this. The other mistake I see mixing engineers make when working with master engineers is not communicating the entire scope of the project. I may get the first single, it doesn't have any drums, and the reference mix is pushed really hot. Then 2 weeks later, I get a full band song. And because of the arrangement of that song, that cannot be pushed as loud as that acoustic song. That pushed me into a box because I didn't know the full scope of the project before I started, so that I could recommend, hey, let's pull the volume back from the reference track. So when I get the next songs, everything dynamically fits, so I can create a dynamic arc to the entirety of the project. That's a really important part of what mastering brings to the table. Obviously, it's my responsibility to ask questions before we get started, but communicating the scope of the project right from the beginning can be really helpful. A lot of times when I'm presented work, it's always done with urgency. I need this tomorrow. I need this in 2 days. And I can't really stop, gather all this information about this project before I move forward with mastering. I may need to meet that deadline and I may need to do it right away. So if you're on a tight deadline, communication of the scope of the project is super important from the start. The next thing is file delivery. Ideally, I'll get a main mix with all of the mix bus processing, but without the final limiter. Then I'll get a version of the main mix with the limiter on. In addition to that, I want all of the alternates that you want mastered, the clean, TV, instrumental, acapella, and it's best to get those up front from the start of the project. Now, I know a lot of engineers kind of worry about taking their limiter off of their project because the limiter might be holding that mix together, but that limiter is also what's reducing my ability to envelope shape individual sounds and create a different dynamic effect that's already set in that loud reference track. If you're not comfortable taking that limiter off, that's perfectly fine. I can deal with it, but it's really nice to have that option. Ultimately, limiters are a little dumb and there's not that much magic built into them. 99% of the time, I can beat your loud reference track with an assortment of my own limiters. And I get the added benefit of envelope shaping and changing the dynamics before it hits the limiter. Finally, what are some simple best practices before sending your mixes off to mastering? And this may sound obvious, but actually listen to the mix that was bounced out of your DAW before you send it to mastering. And you might even want to sit with that mix for a day or 2 before you send it to mastering. I often get revision notes that are not about the mastering at all. It's that some track was muted or it was the wrong vocal take. And those changes and interactions are perfectly natural and a common part of the mastering process. Ultimately, it is a very iterative process sometimes, but it's really important to get your productions done and get your mixes where you want them before you go to mastering, especially if you're on tight deadlines. Mastering is the final step in record production. It's not the rescue mission. Make intentional moves with mixing. Don't overcook it. Listen to your record the next day before you send it off to mastering, and mastering will take care of itself. That's it for now. Until next time.